Hey guys, hopefully everyone can hear me. As I said, that this is going to be a very new and who knows how it's going to go. But hopefully you can see some of the slides and there's a demo that I've embedded into here. So hopefully we can work through and hopefully explain a little bit more. Oh no, that can't happen. Hopefully we can start to have a look at what Veeam DataLabs is, but the whole idea of these, and this is kind of this first stream is to really highlight what Veeam DataLabs is, but there'll be other areas and topics that we touch on. And then off the back of this, we're going to go into things like SureBackup and other areas of Veeam DataLabs and go into a bit more of a deeper demo of them. So hopefully if audio's good, thanks Craig. Hopefully you can see the slides as well. So let's jump in. And apologies for my ugly mug with the green screen on, but hopefully my audio is good and you can see what I'm talking about. So I think the first and foremost thing is to talk about, and this isn't a marketing pitch at all. Obviously this is there to help people just understand a bit more about when we're talking about Veeam and Veeam DataLabs is about understanding that it's not necessarily just about backup and recovery. Obviously that's been our bread and butter for many years. But what we're going to talk about today is something that's been in the product for also many years, but it's probably not the first and foremost of what we think. A bit like Veeam One in a way, is that Veeam One is our monitoring and analytics tool, but no one ever just buys Veeam One. They buy Veeam Backup and Replication for that need of being able to back up their data. And I think regardless of whether you're talking about Veeam or whether you're talking about anything, is backup and recovery is kind of a table stakes. Yes, we can make things go faster. We can make things go be agnostic and only be software defined and all of that good stuff. Ultimately, though, that backup is an insurance policy, regardless of whether it's physical machines, virtual machines, cloud-based workloads, all of that. They're kind of we all do the same things. And I'm talking a broader, the backup industry, the backup ecosystem, we all do the same thing. We move data from here and put it to there. And when we come to recovery, yes, there's some differentiators in there, but they're kind of table stakes when it comes to we need to lift and shift data from A to B. Pick your vendor. They probably do it in very similar ways. Yes, there are some differentiators within that. That's obviously a given, and that's why people are ahead in the game. But when it comes to actually doing something with that data, that's a huge differentiator. And even more so over the last 12 to 18 months, probably 2 years, is people wanting to be able to, people wanting to do more with that data and not just have it sat there for the retention period of the backup and then it gets washed away and then you rebuild and you have your backup retention policies that just keep that data there. Let's do something with that data, and that's where we believe, and obviously it's not just Veeam either. I think from a community standpoint, I would always advocate that people should be trying to bend the products, bend the technology that they've got to do something that they need it to do. But then there's also features and functionality within the product that allow you to do that. So we know this from a community point of view. We live in a world of change. We know how critical that data is. That's been drilled into us as a IT community, as data admins. It's been there. This is not changing, and the risk in terms of changing something within your infrastructure that could potentially cause outage, downtime, all of that stuff, Windows updates, patches to applications, all of that is kind of the unknown for the IT admin or the data administrator, the backup admin, etc. So this is all building up to where I'm going to talk about, and that's about the leveraging of data, or what some would call copy data management or data reuse, but really it's about putting that data to work or getting some sort of insight out of that data. So what is Veeam DataLabs in terms of, well, Veeam DataLabs is a marketing spin, if you will, that encompasses many different features within the product itself. And that also gives you the ability from a solution point of view to be able to do more with that data. So whether it be like the on-demand sandbox, we could use that backup data that's stored in whatever storage media that is, because obviously we don't have a hardware appliance that allows us to do it, but we can back up to really any form of disk. Is we could take that and put it to work. So spin it up as a virtual machine in an isolated environment, whether it be on like in your production environment or a secondary test and dev type environment. And now you've got access to that backup data, and you can start to do stuff with that data. So whether it's testing the patch before it goes live, so that you're not risking bringing down the whole system, your mission critical systems, making sure that any data classification that you want to understand inside those images, inside those virtual machines is you're keeping what you need to keep. So that's really, and we'll go through some of those use cases and scenarios as well. Then SureBackup, SureReplica. Well, how do we leverage that to ensure that those backups are in a really good state? So the only time that you generally, and this is from speaking to lots of different customers throughout the years, is that really when who test their backups, and if you say that you're testing your backups when you recover them, there's a massive element of risk in there. So being able to test them in an automated fashion is exactly where SureBackup and SureReplica comes in. Being able to spin them up in that isolated environment, run and again we'll go through what these look like, but basically validating that backup that is now stored in that disk in that location is still going to be good when you come to recover from it. And then we've said about patches, stage restore. How do we ensure that when we are restoring something, we're not restoring bad data, or we need to do an update on the way to restoring that? This is about injecting a process into that restore process, so that your production machine is in the best possible state it could be when it gets there. I think from a messaging point of view, when this came out, it was more around GDPR and the right to be forgotten. So removing John Smith from a production database is relatively easy. It's not so easy when it comes to a backup that we have to restore. So that same SQL scenario, you would ultimately either recover that whole SQL database server and bring it back into your production, and then remove John Smith from there using the same technique that you did, or wouldn't it be more prudent for the data admin or the backup admin to actually inject that script, that process that removed it from production, into this holding ground, this isolated environment, before it then gets pushed back into production? And then secure restore is about making sure that, and I'm going to get into this in more detail as well, but this is around making sure that when you recover any workload, let's make sure that there's no bad malicious threats within that backup. And that it's not just about restoring those workloads from B to A, but think about when we have a lot of functionality that allows us to send our backup data to AWS or Microsoft Azure and convert that virtual machine into an Azure VM or into an AWS EC2 instance. It would be really good if we could scan that against the latest virus definitions before we did that conversion, to make sure that you were pushing something back up that's in a good state. So use cases, you could probably think of a load from just that list that I've just gone through, but really SureBackup really hits on that first one: improve the backup related operational efficiencies. If you know that your backups are in a good state and you can restore from them because they've actually been tested and you've spun them up every day or every night after the backup is finished, well, that's going to give you a good set of, it's going to be good peace of mind to make sure that you know that those backups are good, which then leads on to the sandbox, but also still the automated approach is, well, you're going to improve yourself because you don't have to manually go and test that. That's a completely scheduled, automated approach. And cheers, James. I just saw your note around that you're taking notes. Improving IT services. So if you can give out that isolated environment so that your different teams could take advantage of that, and they're not messing with production data. That's going to have huge benefits. They're going to glean insight out of that data, allow you to make better business decisions, and so on and so forth. That it's your own automated way of running your test and dev environment off the latest backup. And that's really the point. And again, we'll get into what that sandbox looks like. It doesn't have to be the backup. It could be a replica, but it also could be a storage snapshot. Then we get into other areas. What else could really use that sandbox environment? Well, things like security and forensics. Again, we probably don't want the audit team running in and doing all of their audit processing on our production environments. Let's just give them last night's backup environment, and there you go, audit team, have at it. Whatever you do, you're not affecting anything with my business. Everything is focused in this isolated environment. When they're done, throw it away. No impact on production performance at that point. What also you've got is, well, that's read-only. Yes, we've got the ability in that sandbox environment to have a write cache, so any changes that they do make will capture those. So they can actually use the application, they can use the data set that they've got. But really that whole focus around, they don't have to be anywhere near the production data. And then that leads on to things like, well, use Stage Restore to mask the data. We don't want the audit team or a third-party security team actually seeing any of our customer information. So let's, on the way through to this isolated environment, let's mask that data with a injector script, injector process, and ultimately stop them seeing data. They can just see hashes there. They don't need to see the names and the numbers, because ultimately, if you started looking down regulation, you're probably going to see that that's a potential threat and a potential bad thing. And then from an analyze and ensure compliance, let's make sure that the data that we're backing up is good, but also the data within. So I've said about SureBackup, we're going to test against the VM, the operating system, the application, and ultimately test against the whole data, or the application group we call it. But that's great. But what happens if there's there's actually a database in there, and there's elements of data within there that we need to ensure that are in a good state? Well, using this ability to inject processes into that sandbox environment gives you the ability to do so much more as well. And there's all along the line, there's all customization. You can bring your own stuff. You can do it out of the box and achieve so much. But then it's extensible as well. You can put your own stuff in there. This isn't new by any means. This is not a launch of anything. This has been going on for quite some time. I believe you could go back to at least 2015, 2016 when we started doing this from a backup file, which obviously takes advantage of where we're storing that backup file. So it's not just a dumping ground for backups. We could do it from a replicated VM. So now think about automated DR testing, and maybe later on in the stream, like other sessions, we can talk about VAO, Veeam Availability Orchestrator, how it even goes one step further on being able to test and ensure that those replicas are in a good place. Doing it from storage snapshots, now that opens up the door to be able to do so much more around performance testing, because you're now leveraging the storage snapshot, the actual production array, to be able to spin up these database services, not from potential second-class backup repository disk. And then finally, all about the restore, or all about being able to move the data and ensuring that data is in the state that it needs to be in by either injecting a process or at that stage restore, that secure restore, making sure that it's virus-free, it's malware-free. So here we go. We're going to talk about the glossary, and I'm trying to give a bit of an umbrella view of what DataLabs actually is. Everyone's heard it. Everyone's potentially thinks it might be just one piece of what we're going to talk about, but really it's about, well, Veeam DataLabs here is a marketing name that encompasses many different features. And the one that I didn't touch on the last one is the data integration API that came out in V10. So the earlier, back in 2020. And we'll do another session that deep dives into what that is. So then, what are the components? So there's 3 key components to how we leverage some of these features, and some use all of them, some use some of them. So the virtual lab is the networking construct. So think about a vSwitch. Think about that. How do we create that isolated environment within our environment, within our virtual environment? Then we've got our application group, which is, well, let's take our domain controller, our web server, and our database. We'll create an application group with those 3. And then what's going to drive that? What's going to manage that? So a SureBackup job. This is where we're going to define the virtual lab, the application group. You can have many virtual labs. You can have many application groups. The SureBackup job brings them together and allows you to actually start scheduling that work or that job, that workload. So just from an architecture point of view, what does that look like? Obviously, on day 1, we have our 3-tier app. We have our DC database server, web server, running our production environment on a virtual switch, virtual network, whatever you want to call it. Then we create our data lab. Our data lab consists of something called a proxy appliance, which is a one-way in system, so that you could actually access the contents within the virtual lab or within this isolated environment. And that bridges the gap between this virtual switch, this virtual lab, this isolated network switch that we want to leverage, rather than you obviously can't bring up all of these VMs from a backup in the same production environment. Things are going to start to go very wrong very quickly. I'm sure many of us have experienced that. So then we take our application group, and it might just be 2 of those production systems. It could be 100, it could be 1,000, whatever, as long as you've got the resources. The key thing to note here is that this is based on resources. So you still need CPU and memory in your virtualization environment. You just don't need the storage, because we're going to present it either from the backup, the replication storage, so whatever the data store is in the secondary vSphere environment, but then also the if you're using storage snapshots, that the storage is dealt with, but you still need the CPU and memory resources. Another key thing here is this doesn't need to be to the same production environment. It can be to any vSphere environment. So if you've got a production and a test and dev type environment that's still running vSphere or Hyper-V, then we could do the same thing there. It doesn't need to originate. The backup doesn't need to have come from the same source that we're going to send it to. So we power that up, and we define when we want to power that up, how we want to power that up. And then from externally, or so from the production IP, say this is a data administrator auditor, they take their work machine. We then have the ability to RDP. Obviously, you open up the ports that need to be accessible.
Sorry, I'm having trouble here.
And then they've got access into that isolated environment as if it was the normal production. Ultimately, it's just a network running some virtual machines, potentially a little bit slower than production because they're running from backup storage, if that was the chosen route. So now to quickly run through these before, then we'll stop for some Q&A, and then I'll kind of touch on where I think the stream will go in terms of next sessions and how we deep dive into these. So from a SureBackup point of view, this is that automated way of being able to verify that your backups, your replicas are in a good place. So just to visually show you what happens here, we take that compressed dedupe backup file, that VBK format, and again, that might be another area that we go down next, is around the portability factor. We take that, we present that as a data store into your hypervisor. So that's then seen as a set of disks within vSphere or within Hyper-V. We then spin up that application group in that virtual lab, and then we run that test against the VM, the OS, and the app, and then a report gets sent out to you as an admin. So this should auto play as a demo. But you'll see as well, so this is old, right? Veeam 2019. Oh, wouldn't it be great to go back to 2019? Although we'd know that we've got 2020 coming now. But ultimately, this hasn't changed. This is in the product. So if we're going to run that SureBackup job, we can see there's only one machine. This is a web server, but this is a SureBackup job that is literally going to test that web server is in a good state. So over on the vSphere environment, you can see that virtual lab proxy appliance is now booted up in our resource group of our vSphere, of our target environment. So you can see that proxy appliance has now come up. That was the 175, that was the ping. So this CentOS box. So what we're doing in the background here, we're going to present that data store, as it were, or the backup repository or the backup file as a data store. And you're going to see that under data stores that we've now got that here. Yeah, Craig, Veeam on party, eh? And then you start to see that, so we're automating this. We're going to add to inventory that virtual machine or virtual machines if your application group was larger. We're then going to publish it. We're going to reconfigure it. We're going to register it. We're going to make sure that it hits the right isolated network. We're then going to run application initialization and tests. So if it's a web server, we'll run a test against that. And then we're going to unpublish it and we're going to throw it away because the report's been sent. And hopefully the video, if I remember rightly, it's a fair while ago. But hopefully that email is going to say, yep, we tested against this. It came up. It was absolutely fine. And okay, I just showed you what that looked like in vSphere. But imagine this happened at 2 o'clock in the morning after the backup cycle. Just having that peace of mind when you came in, we ran a web server script and everything was good on our main production web server farm. We spun it up in an isolated environment. We tested against it. We made sure everything was good. And yeah, great job. Good backup. So that's SureBackup, and there's an example of that as well. Then we get on to, well, okay, so what happens now if we want to use the same technology, the same functionality, but let's leave it running for a little bit longer. So same process. Looks exactly the same. Yeah, good point, Craig. So we'll absolutely go through that. The biggest concern or biggest question or complication when it comes to SureBackup or when it comes to virtual lab configuration is absolutely the network. So what we'll do in a later stream, we'll touch on some of the reasons and some of the options that we have within that. I think that is absolutely needed. So On-Demand Sandbox looks and feels exactly the same, except now that same laptop image that you saw, well, now it's going to stay up, it's going to be running. So now you've got access to go into that sandbox environment. And that could be from the backup, that could be from the storage snapshot. It could also be from a replica when it comes to vSphere. But what another key part to that is they could be mixed as well. So you could have your SQL box running from a storage snapshot where we integrate with, but then your domain controller and maybe the web server, they can run from the backup because they're not as resource, they're not storage hungry like a database would be. Then quickly running through stage restore. So this is the concept of injecting a process into that restore. So if you think, so the example they used when we launched this was around injecting a process to remove data from the machine before it lands back in production. Maybe a database, like I used that example. But this could be used for so many things. This could be used for Windows updates. This could be used for like just patches in general around application patches. This could be used for so many things. It's ultimately just a way of being able to inject a process into that restore process before it lands back into production. And again, we'll touch on more about examples of, and I think these next two, this stage restore and secure restore, is really interesting because this is where we've created something that enables people to do more with their data, but kind of left it at that. And then it's amazing to see, and I know we've got a load of vanguards on the stream, but these guys have gone out and created some pretty incredible stuff around what they could do with this functionality. And then secure restore, the focus here is if you're going to be restoring from a backup that's 1, 2, 3 plus days old, let's make sure that there's no threats within that backup. These are options as well. You don't have to do it. So we're going to mount that into that isolated type environment or to the mount server. We're going to then trigger the antivirus to take the scan. Now, that's not us. We don't have an antivirus product ourselves, but we integrate into some others that will come up shortly. Basically, nothing's found, carry on. And these are all options that you define. 4B, we've found an infection. Okay, continue, but we're going to put it into some sort of safe mode. We're going to disable the network adapters, and then maybe a security team can come in and like investigate why and what that is, and maybe there's a fix for that if the data is absolutely mission critical. But if you're a small band, let's just go back to another restore point or another way of being able to restore that data. We found the infection, disregard the process, we don't need it. And all of those are all optional. You can tweak what that setting looks like. And Secure Restore is everywhere. If you look within any restore, so obviously from a virtual machine, a physical machine, being able to restore any machine anywhere, this is an option. Also, the direct restore to AWS and Azure, also an option. And you'll find it in so many different ways. The final one to touch on is it's also part of that SureBackup. So not only are we testing against the VM, the app, and the OS, we could also test against malicious activity in there as well. So they're just some of the antivirus that we kind of launched with. Windows Defender, ideal because every mount server is going to have that. ESET, Symantec Protection Engine, and I think there's a few more listed in the Veeam forums as well. Now this is where it gets quite interesting. So again, we've created something that enables customers to do what they want with their data. So what this ultimately does, it takes all of the disks that you've created and it exposes those to that mount server or to a mount server, wherever you want that to be. And V11 changes a few more things with the data integration API as well. We just have to sit tight for that release. But the possibilities here are quite endless, whether it's data classification, understanding what that data is within those disks, those image-based backups, whether it's putting that data to work, like whether it's a file server and being able to run scans against that data rather than doing it against production. There's so many different ways. Again, Vanguards have taken this and done some pretty incredible stuff. I fully expect a full stream on doing something around this as well. Future, so I've already mentioned around V11, and expect we're not stopping around doing stuff with data. Backup and recovery is obviously our forefront, but being able to do stuff with that data and enabling our customers to do more is very important. So I've written some, I believe that middle QR code is a link to some white papers on veeam.com that go detailed into the network configuration, but I appreciate that not everyone wants to read those technical reports, especially with the day and age of YouTube, and we can just chat around what it looks like and what we do. There's also loads of there's so much content out there around this already. So what can we expect? So where do we go now? So this was kind of this is cutting my teeth to see what YouTube live streaming looks like, whether it's useful. We've got a few people on, so that's a good start. But also, let's go into a much deeper dive into some of these areas. And I think off the back of what we've already gone through as an overview, I think SureBackup configuration, especially around the networking, is key. Create your on-demand sandbox environment. How do you do it? Well, them two look very similar, but we'll make 2 sessions out of that. Secure Restore, well, let's see what else it's for, not just potentially the traditional restore scenario. And then data integration API. And then we're going to get into V11. So then there's going to be so many more things that get added to this. But I think, really what I'd ask, obviously the people on the stream, I can see the live chat here, but also any comments in the description below, because this will go up and you can always catch this later on. I think one feedback on how was this? It was probably a bit long for the initial one, but I think it was worth it just to cover everything. the idea is to keep these sessions around 10 to 15 minutes, but go into it and get some proper demos out. So feedback, but also, and I've just seen, James, you absolutely, I took an old session, or I took a session and just plonked my face in the right place. But yeah, absolutely, it needs some jiggery around that. What else? Yeah, Craig, good point. Maybe we'll touch that in the SureBackup. So how out of the box, we've got specific. I mentioned web server. I showed web server, but there's also things around Exchange and Active Directory and bespoke focused tests that you might run. But there's also the ability to run custom tests in there, and then we can get into SureBackup could probably have 4 streams on its own to touch on stuff. But I think hopefully in general that gives you a good overview of Veeam DataLabs. If there's any questions, then drop it down. But yeah, I think the whole this is what I'm intending to do, rather than we can't obviously see each other, so we're not going to be doing user groups out there in person, and hopefully it helps a wider group of people that potentially weren't able to get to that. So with that, I'll stick around for some questions. But yeah, if there's anything else, then you can find me on Twitter. But yeah, leave anything in the comments down below, and hopefully we can get some subscriptions out of this, right? Cool. I should be able to see the stream chat now. Just going back to see what you guys asked. I guess on timing, so we'll try and do, if Friday works. Friday seems to be, well, any day. We're all at home, the world over. Friday at 12:30 seems to be that nice drip between, so from an EMEA point of view, and then even going into the US. And in fact, I saw Andre on as well, so big shout out to down in ANZ. So yeah, obviously a good time to potentially do it, but we'll definitely keep an eye out and keep a look on timing of this. But was that so obviously I just started this and people just rocked up. Obviously I told everyone about it in the Vanguard chat, but maybe there's a way of being able to publish this on before I go and kind of make a bit of a schedule for it. But yeah, I think everything feels pretty good. It's just like a session, so yeah, all good. Yeah, Craig, I think there's some work to be done around how the stream actually looks, like actually designing and putting slides together that fit with the session. Like I said, I just took one that that was already a session that I'd already created. But yeah, we need to look at the overlays and how it looks. But overall, I think sound looks good, which is the 90% of the battle, making sure sound looks good. Sound is good. But yeah, I think we're good. Any questions? Drop it to me in Twitter. But you guys, I'd see a load of Vanguards in. So yeah, just drop it in. Just drop it in Slack. With that, cheers guys. Thank you.